Teachers inspire students daily through different methods, but nothing is as powerful as leading by example. Mark Gregson, a 7th grade ELA teacher at Eastmont Middle School, shared a life lesson of grit when pursuing dreams. When he's not teaching, Gregson is writing and creating young adult fiction, something he works on in the wee hours of the morning and late into the night. After 10 years of trying, he signed with an agent and scored a 3-book deal with a publisher and has shared his journey with his students. On May 26th, Gregson shared an exciting part of his book publishing journey when he arranged for the kids at Eastmont to get a sneak peek at the cover art of his first book. He made an agreement with his publishers that the students could see the cover art early under one condition, that he sees it for the first time with them.
We're going to count from 10, and you guys are welcome to make some noise when we see it. I might cry, so I hope I don't embarrass you, but it's been a long time coming, guys. All right. Here we go. Let's move to
the excitement in the room was
Countdown
evident
together.
as the kids cheered through a countdown to the cover reveal. It was obviously a moment that many will remember and be inspired by as they pursue their own goals. I'm Stephanie Christensen, and this is Connect Canyons.
Welcome to Connect Canyons, a podcast sponsored by Canyon School District. This is a show about what we teach, how we teach, and why. We get up close and personal with some of the people who make our schools great. Students, teachers, principals, parents, and more. We meet national experts, too. Learning is about making connections. So connect with us.
Recently, I caught up with Gregson, and here's that discussion. Tell us about your books.
My book is called Sky's End, and it's book 1 of a trilogy. And the trilogy is called Above the Black. My book is set on floating islands in the sky, sky ships, sky serpents. We've got vicious duels, dueling canes, a twisted meritocracy where there's only winners and losers. It's kind of like Attack on Titan meets Hunger Games. That's how my publisher is pitching it.
So, as a teacher, how did you find time to write a book, let alone a trilogy?
Well, I think that people often try to make time for the things that they really enjoy. And so I love writing. It's a big passion of mine. When I first started teaching my first couple years, I didn't write as much because I was so preoccupied with my lessons and making sure that I was effective. But I have since, I wake up early in the morning and I try to write before work. And then I try to maybe write for an hour or 2 each night if I can. I just try to be consistent and write as much as I can. And because I like it so much, it's not as difficult for me to find time in the day to do it.
What a great lesson for your students, too, to say, if you really have a passion, no matter what you're doing in your life, you can continue to chase that dream and make time for it, because creativity takes time, and I don't think people often remember creativity's work.
Yeah, you have to really want it, and getting published is so difficult. Like getting an agent, I had to get an agent first, and getting an agent took me 10 years. And so I actually, before Sky's End, I wrote 5 books before Sky's End, and I kept getting better and better and better.
How much have you shared with your students, and how do you translate this into lessons for your students?
Well, my students are they're the perfect age as far as giant monsters and things like that. My book's got with these giant sky serpents, and so I actually have a whole wall of fan art of students who've been drawing things. And one of the things I try to emphasize to my students as well, because a lot of them are like to write, and that's actually one of my fast finishers. If you finish your work early and you don't have homework in another class and you got 5 minutes, then sit down, you can write something. And anytime they can just get excited about writing is great to see. But I tell my students, it's, I watched this video, Jack Black, he's so great. And he was just dropping some wisdom while he was drinking a Slurpee.
As you do.
And they asked him how to break into filmmaking. And he said, embrace being bad. It's it's okay to be bad when you first start out. Just get out there and just start creating. Just be bad and be okay with it. And then the more that you practice it, the better at it you're going to become. And then eventually, you'll surprise yourself. You'll be having fun while you're being bad. And then you'll surprise yourself after a couple years that suddenly you're not bad anymore. You're starting to get pretty good at this.
So have you found that when you're teaching students about writing, you're able to say, hey, I'm a published writer now, that you get a little more cred with your students?
I think it does give them some credibility, especially when I talk about revising. A lot of students think once they finish, they hit period at the very end of the essay or whatever, that all their work is done. For myself, like when I'm writing, I have like a very, very, very rough first draft. And then I spend probably twice as long editing what I wrote out there. So, the process of writing is usually our first ideas are not our best ideas. And so it's just a process of revision and going back and making the best you can.
Say your book does take off like the Hunger Games. Do you continue to teach?
I love teaching. It's been my favorite job that I've had, and I would like to continue teaching as long as possible. If things picked up to the point of where it's not feasible, I'm getting sent to conferences all the time, and I have lots of obligations, then I'd have to look at it, but I love teaching.
Did I read that your books already are optioned?
So book one, we got our deal back in, my agent and I, we got the offer back in January last year. It actually happened in my 7th period class. And it was like, I noticed it, I told my students, and the whole room was like cheering. It was crazy. So I got the offer last year during my 7th period. And then I got the offer for books 2 and 3 this year. And I think it was my 7th period again. So it came at the same time each time. I think 7 might be your lucky number from now on. Apparently. The first book, they were hinting, my publisher was hinting, my editor at the publisher was hinting that they wanted more. And then outright, like in September of last year, he said, I'm ready to see book 2 and an outline for book 3. And my agent and I are like, whoa. And she's like, no, don't mess this up. Make sure it's really good.
No pressure.
No pressure. Because she's like, if you do this right, we might get a 2-book deal and then you have all 3. And so I spent just hours. I was writing maybe 4 hours a day. And I'd already been writing it before, but that was really like the kick in the pants that got me to finish the whole thing. And I got it to my editor in February. And when he finally got to it, he read it in just a few days, and we had the offer the next week, and for books 2 and 3. So it was pretty amazing. And first one's coming out January 2nd next year, and then the sequel, Among Serpents, is planned for January 25, and then the finale, which I'm writing right now, Downfall, is coming out in January 26.
Will this be assigned as a class reading assignment?
No. So
not a bad idea.
It's funny thinking about like book reports for next year, because like once we get past, January, I'm assuming that my last 2 book reports, I'm going to start seeing students who are going to be doing book reports on, that's going to be surreal, looking at book reports on my own book. And I'm like, if you do my book, guys, I know it pretty well. So don't try to fake your way through this one.
So what advice would you give to kids that are interested in being authors?
Well, if they're interested in being an author, just, really enjoy the process of creating and understand that it's not easy. I think about like the zone, like in teaching in the zone of proximal development. When we first start something, it's very frustrating for us, and it can make ourselves very miserable and unhappy. But LeBron James didn't become LeBron James just immediately picking up the basketball. Yes, he's probably was like born athletic, but he still had to go in there and spend thousands of hours in the gym practicing. And I think if we feed our inner critic, we feed that imposter syndrome, telling ourselves that we're not good enough, then it's going to make us quit. So you just have to keep practicing until you reach that zone where it's challenging, but not so challenging that it's not fun.
That's awesome. And as far as for parents that have children that are interested in becoming authors, how would you suggest that they help nurture that talent?
Well, reading, I think, is going to be the primary thing. Read good books and read bad books, books that you don't like, and try to figure out why you don't like them. That's a really good thing to do. You practice and figure out what exactly about the book you didn't like or the writing that you didn't like. So I think that's really key. That's a good idea.
It's interesting you said that about reading even bad books. Martin Scorsese has a big thing about watching tons of B movies because that's like one of the best film educations you can get is from watching, because you learn from the good and the bad. Being able to dissect things and figure out, well, this worked because why, or this didn't work, really is that critical.
Yeah. Well, it's like when, so like as a teacher, when I'm projecting something for students, I give them an example and a non-example. And so we can learn a lot from the non-example. Sometimes like it can be overwhelming looking at the great example, the 100%. There's a lot that they put into it. But then when you look at the non-example, most of the students will be like, oh yeah, that was kind of lazy. Like I can do better than that.
How exciting will it be though when you're walking through the library at Eastmont and your book's on display?
I mean, it's going to be surreal. It's really a strange feeling. You know, like after I got the book deal, I kind of was just like chuckling because it was something I had been daydreaming about for like 20 years. And it was funny, like after I like celebrated with my wife and stuff, I went and sat outside my backyard. And it was just like the wind was just blowing like normal. There's a dog barking. Like everything was normal. But I felt like I had just achieved this thing that I had been dreaming of my whole life, and it was just me sitting there just happy.
That's awesome. Very zen. Well, thank you so much for coming in. It was great to meet you. And we're excited now. When does the book, we got to get the important details out there. When's the book come out, and how can people get it? And
Awesome. So Sky's End is coming out January 2nd, 2024. And it is available for pre-order now. So even though the cover is not out, it has jumped up and it's available for pre-order. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Walmart, Books A Million. I do a lot on social media. So if you go onto my profiles on Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, you go onto my profile on there, and my top link is pre-order.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Connect Canyons. Connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram @Canyons District, or on our website, canyonsdistrict.org.